The massive hull of the USS Leviathan sat dead in the water, its cutting-edge propulsion system completely silent. 3 of the Navy's top marine engineers stood around the disabled engine, their faces etched with frustration and defeat. They had run every diagnostic test in the book, replaced components, and consulted technical manuals for hours. Nothing worked. The ship was scheduled to deploy in 18 hours for a critical mission that had been months in the planning. Without propulsion, the entire operation would collapse. Chief Engineer Martinez wiped sweat from his forehead as he stared at the massive turbine assembly. This wasn't just any engine failure. This was the most advanced marine propulsion system ever built, incorporating hybrid technology that cost taxpayers over $40 million. The LM-2500 gas turbine paired with electric drive systems represented the pinnacle of naval engineering. And now it was nothing more than an expensive paperweight. "We've checked everything twice," Martinez muttered to his team. "Fuel systems, electrical connections, cooling circuits, computer diagnostics. The engine starts up fine, runs for exactly 93 seconds, then loses power completely. It's like something is choking it out, but we can't find the source." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the ship's engineering officer, paced nervously behind the group. The mission briefing had been classified at the highest levels. She couldn't reveal details, but she knew that allies were counting on this vessel to be in position by dawn. Failure wasn't an option, yet they were running out of time and ideas. "What about bringing in contractors?" suggested Engineer Jackson, the youngest member of the team. "General Dynamics has specialists who worked on the original design. Maybe they can fly someone in." Martinez shook his head. "Already tried. Their earliest availability is next week. We need this fixed in the next few hours, not next week." The team fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts about what they might have missed. The engine bay hummed with the sound of ventilation systems and the distant murmur of crew members going about their duties, unaware that their ship was essentially stranded. That's when Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez appeared at the entrance to the engine compartment. Rodriguez had been with the Navy for 28 years and had a reputation for knowing everyone and everything that happened on base. His weathered face carried the expression of someone who had seen every kind of crisis the Navy could throw at him. "Chief Martinez," Rodriguez called out, "I might have an idea." Martinez looked up from the engine schematics spread across a nearby table. "At this point, Chief, I'll take any idea you've got." Rodriguez stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly. "There's a guy who used to work on these systems, retired about 8 years ago. Lives about an hour from here. Name's Brandon Clark. He was the lead engineer on the original LM-2500 hybrid prototypes back when they were still experimental." The name didn't ring a bell for Martinez, but Chen's expression changed immediately. "Brandon Clark? I've heard that name before. Wasn't he involved in some kind of controversy?" Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Yeah, there was an incident. Engine failure during sea trials. The investigation blamed him for inadequate maintenance protocols. He was forced into early retirement. But..." Rodriguez paused, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "But a lot of us who were there thought he got railroaded. The failure analysis never made complete sense." "Where is he now?" Martinez asked. "Last I heard, he was working as a boat mechanic in some small coastal town. Tracy, I think. Fixes fishing boats and pleasure craft. Probably makes 1/10 of what he used to earn." Martinez considered this information. Bringing in a disgraced former engineer wasn't exactly standard protocol. If word got back to the brass that they had called in someone who had been forced out under questionable circumstances, it could reflect poorly on his own career. But the alternative was mission failure, which would definitely end his career. "Do you have his contact information?" Martinez asked. Rodriguez pulled out his phone. "I can get it. But, Chief, you should know something else. Brandon Clark didn't just work on these engines. He helped design them. If anyone understands how they really work, it's him." Chen stepped forward. "What exactly are you suggesting, Chief Rodriguez?" "I'm suggesting that maybe the guy who helped create these systems might be able to fix what's wrong with them, even if it means swallowing some pride and admitting we need help from someone the Navy threw away." The engine compartment fell quiet except for the constant hum of ship systems. Martinez looked at his watch. 17 hours until deployment. His team of experts had exhausted their knowledge and resources. Standard procedures had failed. The book had been thrown at this problem, and the book had lost. "Get me his number," Martinez said finally. Rodriguez nodded and stepped away to make some calls. Within 20 minutes, he returned with a piece of paper containing a phone number and an address. "He's still in Tracy. Works out of an old marine repair shop near the harbor." Martinez took the paper and stared at it for a long moment. He was about to make a decision that could either save the mission or destroy his reputation. In the Navy, asking for help from a disgraced former colleague was almost as bad as admitting incompetence. But sometimes, desperate times called for desperate measures. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. "Clark speaking. Mr. Clark, this is Chief Engineer Martinez, USS Leviathan. I'm calling because we have a propulsion system failure, and I understand you have experience with LM-2500 hybrid systems." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Martinez could hear the sound of tools being set down and someone taking a deep breath. "What kind of failure?" Clark asked finally. "Engine starts normally, runs for 93 seconds, then loses power completely. We've checked all the obvious systems: fuel, electrical, cooling, computer diagnostics. Everything tests normal, but the engine won't maintain power." Another pause. Martinez could hear the older man thinking. 93 seconds is very specific," Clark said. "That's not random. Something is triggering a shutdown at that exact interval. Have you checked the harmonic dampening systems?" Martinez frowned. "The what?" "The harmonic dampening systems. They're designed to prevent resonance vibrations from building up in the turbine assembly. If the dampeners are misaligned or damaged, they can create feedback loops that the computer interprets as critical system failures." Martinez looked at his team. None of them had mentioned harmonic dampeners. It wasn't part of the standard troubleshooting protocol. "Mr. Clark," Martinez said, "would you be willing to come take a look at this system? We're facing a critical deadline and we're running out of options." The line went quiet for nearly a minute. Martinez began to wonder if the call had been dropped. "I'll need security clearance," Clark said eventually, "and transportation. My truck probably wouldn't make it that far. We can arrange both. How soon can you be ready?" "Give me an hour." Martinez hung up and turned to his team. "We're bringing in a consultant. He should be here in about 2 hours. In the meantime, I want you to locate the harmonic dampening systems and run diagnostics on them." Chen looked puzzled. "Chief, I've never heard of harmonic dampening systems on these engines." "Neither had I," Martinez admitted. "But if this guy is right, we might have been looking in all the wrong places." As his team dispersed to search for systems they had never heard of, Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to learn just how much they didn't know about the engines they thought they understood. Brandon Clark had been cast aside by the Navy, written off as a failure and forgotten. But if he could solve this problem, it would raise uncomfortable questions about why he had been dismissed in the first place. The clock was ticking. In less than 16 hours, the USS Leviathan needed to be underway. Everything depended on whether a disgraced former engineer could succeed where the Navy's current experts had failed. Martinez just hoped he hadn't made a career-ending mistake by reaching out to a man the system had decided to forget. Admiral Lawson's phone rang again at 6:47 a.m. This time, it was General Morrison from the Pentagon. "Jim, I need to know what's happening with the USS Leviathan. The Secretary of Defense is breathing down my neck. That mission cannot be delayed." Lawson rubbed his temples. "General, we've got Brandon Clark on site. He's identified the problem, but we need time to implement his solution." "Clark? Never heard of him. What are his credentials?" "He's the man who designed half the systems on these ships 30 years ago. The question is whether we can trust him to fix what he helped create." Meanwhile, in the depths of the engineering bay, Brandon stood before the massive hybrid engine with Chief Martinez and the team. The morning shift had arrived, and word had spread quickly through the base about the retired engineer who claimed to understand systems that didn't exist in any manual. "Mr. Clark," Martinez said, "we've located the harmonic dampening systems you mentioned. But sir, these components aren't in any of our technical documentation. How did you know they were there? Brandon ran his weathered hand along the engine casing. Because I put them there. Back in 1987, we were developing the prototype for what would become this engine. The harmonic dampening was my idea, but it was classified above most people's clearance level. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. Sir, if you designed these systems, why aren't you in the Navy anymore? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Brandon had been dreading this moment since he'd agreed to come. The truth was more complicated than anyone in this room could imagine. That's a long story, Chief. Right now, let's focus on getting this engine running. But Martinez wasn't satisfied. Mr. Clark, I need to understand what we're dealing with. These dampening systems you're talking about, they're not just hidden from our manuals. They're actively concealed. Someone went to great lengths to make sure nobody would find them. Brandon's jaw tightened. Because they were never supposed to be used. The dampening systems were designed as a failsafe, but the Navy decided they were too dangerous to include in regular maintenance protocols. Dangerous how? Rodriguez asked. Because if they're adjusted incorrectly, they don't just shut down the engine. They can cause a catastrophic failure that would sink the ship. The engineering bay fell silent. Every technician within earshot had stopped working. The weight of what Brandon had just revealed settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Martinez stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Mr. Clark, are you telling us that you designed a system that could destroy the ship? I designed a system that could save it, Brandon corrected. But like any powerful tool, it can be dangerous in the wrong hands. That's why I was forced out of the Navy. I refused to remove the failsafe, and they refused to let me stay. The pieces were beginning to fall into place. Rodriguez exchanged glances with Martinez, both men realizing they were dealing with more than just a mechanical failure. This was about secrets that had been buried for decades. Sir? Martinez said carefully, if these systems are so dangerous, why didn't you mention that when Admiral Lawson called you? Brandon turned to face the group of engineers and technicians who had gathered around them. Young faces, eager and professional, reminded him of himself 30 years ago. These were good people who deserved the truth. Because, he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of silence, I'm probably the only person alive who knows how to adjust them safely, and because this ship needs to be operational, regardless of what happened to me all those years ago. Chief Martinez made a decision that would change everything. Mr. Clark, I'm going to ask you directly. Can you fix this engine? Yes. Will it be safe? Brandon looked at each face in the circle that had formed around him. If I do this correctly, this engine will run better than it ever has. The harmonic dampening will actually make it more efficient and more reliable than the original specifications. And if you do it incorrectly, then we'll have about 30 seconds to evacuate the engineering section before the engine tears itself apart. Martinez felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about mechanical repair anymore. This was about trust, about taking a leap of faith with a man who had been cast out by the very system they all served. What do you need from us, Mr. Clark? Brandon's expression softened slightly. I need you to clear all non-essential personnel from the engineering bay. I need direct communication with the bridge. And I need someone to document everything I do, step by step, so that if something happens to me, someone else can finish the job. Rodriguez volunteered immediately. I'll be your recorder, sir. I've got experience with technical documentation. Good. Martinez, I'll need you to coordinate with the bridge. When we start the engine, it's going to sound different than anything you've heard before. The harmonic dampening creates a resonance that can be alarming if you're not expecting it. As the team began preparations, Brandon noticed a young technician lingering at the edge of the group. Petty Officer Sarah Chen had been observing everything with the intense focus of someone trying to understand not just what was happening, but why it was happening. Chen. Brandon called out, You look like you have a question. Sir, I do. If you designed these systems, and they're so important, why were they classified? Why hide something that could make our ships better? Brandon smiled sadly. Because, Petty Officer Chen, the Navy has never been comfortable with systems they can't fully control. The harmonic dampening requires intuition as much as technical knowledge. It requires understanding the rhythm of the engine, feeling its heartbeat. That's not something you can teach in a classroom or write in a manual. Chen nodded slowly, like the old-timers who could tune an engine just by listening to it. Exactly, but the Navy wanted everything standardized, predictable, manageable. They didn't want to depend on individual expertise. They wanted systems that any technician could service following a checklist. But that's not how complex systems really work, is it, sir? Brandon looked at her with something approaching pride. No, it's not. And that's why we're here today. Sometimes you need someone who understands that machines have personalities, that they need to be listened to, not just serviced. Martinez returned with the all-clear from the bridge. Mr. Clark, we're ready. Engineering bay is cleared except for essential personnel. Bridge is standing by. All systems are go. Brandon walked over to his tool bag and pulled out a small device that looked like a cross between a stethoscope and a tuning fork. This is a harmonic resonance detector. I built it myself back in 1987. It's the only way to properly calibrate the dampening systems. He approached the engine with the reverence of a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. The harmonic dampening systems were hidden behind panels that looked identical to dozens of others throughout the engine bay. But Brandon's hands moved with certainty, finding the right panels without hesitation. Rodriguez, are you recording? Yes, sir. Every step. Good. The first thing you need to understand is that the harmonic dampening systems are interconnected. You can't adjust one without affecting the others. It's like tuning a piano where every key influences every other key. Brandon began removing panels, revealing components that none of the current engineering staff had ever seen. The dampening systems were elegant in their complexity, a network of precisely calibrated resonators that looked more like musical instruments than mechanical components. Chen, come here. I want you to help me with this. Sir, I'm not qualified to work on classified systems. You're qualified to learn, and right now, learning is more important than protocol. As Chen approached, Brandon handed her the resonance detector. Listen to the engine, not with your ears, but with this device. Tell me what you hear. Chen placed the detector against the engine casing and closed her eyes. After a moment, she opened them with a look of wonder. It's like the engine is singing, but it's off-key. Exactly. The engine is trying to find its natural harmonic frequency, but something is preventing it from getting there. The dampening systems need to be adjusted to help it find its voice. For the next 2 hours, Brandon worked with Chen, Martinez, and Rodriguez to carefully adjust the harmonic dampening systems. It was delicate work, requiring constant monitoring and micro-adjustments. Brandon's hands moved with the confidence of experience, but his eyes showed the strain of performing surgery on a system he hadn't touched in 30 years. Mr. Clark, Martinez said during a brief break, I have to ask, why did you really leave the Navy? Brandon paused, his hands still on the resonance detector. Because I believed that some things are more important than following orders. I believed that the safety of the crew should come before the convenience of the bureaucracy. What happened? I refused to remove the harmonic dampening systems from the production models. I told them it would make the engines less reliable, more prone to failure. They told me that was acceptable because it would make them easier to maintain. Rodriguez shook his head. So they chose easy maintenance over engine reliability. They chose predictability over performance. They wanted engines that would fail in predictable ways, at predictable intervals, so they could schedule maintenance and replacement. They didn't want engines that would run perfectly for decades if properly cared for, because that would be harder to budget for. Chen looked up from the component she was adjusting. That's insane. That's bureaucracy, Brandon replied. The system values consistency over excellence. It's easier to manage mediocrity than to harness brilliance. Martinez felt a chill as he realized the implications. Mr. Clark, how many ships have been deployed with engines that were deliberately made less reliable? Most of them. The Leviathan is one of the few ships that still has the original dampening systems, because it was built from the prototype specifications before they were changed. The weight of this revelation settled over the engineering team. They were working on a ship that was both more capable and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. "Sir," Rodriguez said quietly, "what you're telling us, this could change everything. If the Navy has been deliberately compromising engine reliability, then a lot of people are going to have some very uncomfortable questions to answer," Brandon finished. "But that's not our concern right now. Our concern is making sure this ship can complete its mission." As the afternoon wore on, the harmonic dampening systems began to respond to Brandon's adjustments. The engine's resonance shifted, moving closer to the harmonic frequency that Brandon was seeking. Chen proved to be a natural at reading the resonance detector, her young ears picking up subtle changes that even Brandon sometimes missed. "You have a gift for this," Brandon told her during another break. "Have you ever considered specializing in propulsion systems?" "I've thought about it, sir, but I've been told that women don't do well in engine rooms." Brandon's expression hardened. "Whoever told you that is an idiot. Gender has nothing to do with understanding machines. It's about patience, intuition, and respect for the complexity of the systems you're working with. Will you teach me more about harmonic dampening? If we get through this, I'll teach you everything I know. But first, we need to get this engine running." As the sun began to set over the naval base, Brandon made the final adjustments to the harmonic dampening systems. The engine's resonance had shifted to exactly where he wanted it, the harmonic frequency that would allow it to run at peak efficiency. "Martinez, contact the bridge. Tell them we're ready for the test." "Sir, are you certain? If something goes wrong, then we'll deal with it. But I'm confident in the adjustments we've made. This engine is going to run better than it ever has." Martinez made the call to the bridge, and within minutes, Admiral Lawson arrived in the engineering bay. He looked tired, the weight of command evident in his posture. "Clark, I need to know. Are you absolutely certain about this?" Brandon met his old friend's gaze. "Jim, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. This engine is ready. And if it fails, then you'll have my resignation and my apology. But it won't fail." Lawson nodded slowly. "All right, let's do this." The engineering bay fell silent as Brandon approached the engine control panel. His hand hovered over the start-up sequence, 30 years of doubt and recrimination weighing on his shoulders. "Jen," he called out, "I want you to monitor the harmonic resonance during startup. If anything sounds wrong, anything at all, you tell me immediately." "Yes, sir." "Rodriguez, document everything. If this works, people are going to want to know how we did it." "Already on it, sir." Brandon took a deep breath and initiated the startup sequence. The engine began to turn over, slowly at first, then building speed. But this time, something was different. The sound was cleaner, more focused. The harmonic dampening systems were working, filtering out the destructive frequencies that had been causing the shutdowns. 30 seconds passed, then 60, then 90. At the 2-minute mark, Admiral Lawson allowed himself a small smile. "Clark, I think you've done it." But Brandon wasn't celebrating yet. "We need to run it for at least 10 minutes to be sure. The real test comes when we push it to full power." For the next 8 minutes, the engine ran smoothly, its harmonic resonance steady and true. Chen monitored the readings, her excitement growing as she watched the systems perform exactly as Brandon had predicted. "Sir," she called out, "the resonance is perfect. It's like the engine is singing in tune." At the 10-minute mark, Brandon made the decision that would either vindicate 30 years of frustration or destroy his reputation forever. "Full power," he ordered. The engine's note changed, deepening and strengthening as it reached maximum output. The harmonic dampening systems adjusted automatically, maintaining the perfect frequency even under full load. Minutes passed. The engine ran flawlessly, producing more power than the specifications had ever promised. "My God," Martinez breathed. "It's actually working." Admiral Lawson placed a hand on Brandon's shoulder. "Clark, I owe you an apology." "We all do." Brandon shook his head. "No apologies necessary, Jim. We all did what we thought was right at the time. What happens now?" Brandon looked around the engineering bay, at the faces of the young sailors who had helped him bring his vision to life. "Now, we make sure this knowledge doesn't die with me. These systems need to be documented, taught, and implemented across the fleet. The bureaucracy won't like that. Then the bureaucracy will have to change. Because what we've proven here today is that excellence is possible, but only if we're willing to trust the people who understand the systems they're working with. As the USS Leviathan prepared for its mission, Brandon Clark finally felt the weight of 30 years of exile lifting from his shoulders. He had been vindicated, but more importantly, he had passed on his knowledge to a new generation of engineers who would carry it forward. The ship's engines sang with perfect harmony, a testament to the power of persistence, the value of experience, and the importance of never giving up on the truth. With General Wyatt's helicopter disappearing into the horizon and the USS Leviathan now cutting through the waves with its perfectly calibrated engine, the naval base settled into an unusual quiet, the kind of silence that follows a storm when everyone knows something fundamental has shifted. Admiral Martinez stood at the window of her office, watching the destroyer's wake spread across the harbor. The morning sun caught the water, creating patterns that reminded her of the harmonic frequencies Clark had described. Everything connected, everything in balance when properly understood. 3 days later, she received a call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was measured, professional, but carried an undertone of urgency that made her sit up straighter. Admiral Martinez, this is Director Sarah Chen from the Naval Engineering Command. We've been reviewing the incident reports from the USS Leviathan. We need to discuss Brandon Clark immediately. Martinez felt her stomach tighten. What about him, Director? We've discovered something. The harmonic dampening systems Clark described, they weren't just safety features that got overlooked. They were classified components of a black project called Silent Running. Clark wasn't just the designer of those systems, Admiral. He was the architect of an entire generation of stealth technology that was supposed to remain buried. The implications hit Martinez like a cold wave. Are you saying he had access to classified information? I'm saying Brandon Clark may have been the most important naval engineer of the last 40 years, and someone made sure he disappeared from the official record. The question is, why? And more importantly, who? Chen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Admiral, every ship in the fleet has these systems. If Clark's knowledge falls into the wrong hands, our entire naval advantage could be compromised. We need him back, and we need him secured. Martinez looked out at the harbor again, but now the peaceful scene felt ominous. Director, there's something you need to know. Clark didn't just fix our engine. He revealed fundamental flaws in how we've been approaching naval engineering for decades. The man's knowledge runs deeper than any of us realized. That's exactly what we're afraid of. We're sending a team to bring him in for debriefing. This is now a matter of national security. But when the team arrived at Clark's workshop that afternoon, they found only an empty shed. The tools were gone, the workbench cleared, and a single note pinned to the door. Some knowledge is too dangerous to stay in one place. The sea calls, and I must answer. The brass rod Clark had used to diagnose the engine lay on the floor, its worn surface catching the light. Next to it was a technical manual, open to a page showing harmonic wave patterns. Someone had written in the margin, "The ocean remembers what we choose to forget." Martinez stared at the cryptic message, understanding dawning on her face. Clark hadn't just been a forgotten engineer. He'd been a guardian of secrets that could reshape naval warfare itself. And now, those secrets were sailing away with a man who understood their true power. The USS Leviathan's engines hummed with perfect harmony as it disappeared beyond the horizon, carrying with it the knowledge that some truths are too profound for any institution to contain. Clark had restored more than just an engine. He'd restored the balance between human wisdom and technological power, between innovation and responsibility. And somewhere out there, on the vast expanse of the ocean, the real lesson was just beginning to unfold.